It's the county conversation, and this week we have a Sussex special for you. The county has had, emphasis on the past tense there, a very difficult few years. If you go back 18 months, you could find a long read in the Telegraph by Will Macpherson on the inside story of Sussex's, it's a very difficult word to say, decline. In it, it mentioned that Sussex was understood to be the PCA's club of most concern, that head coach Ian Salisbury had left in fractious circumstances. Players had been signing NDAs upon departure, and former legends like Matt Pryor were speaking out publicly against then CEO Rob Andrew. And on the pitch, it was 3 wins in 3 years. Cut to now, and things seem all the more rosier. Top of Division 2 and chasing top flight county cricket for the first time in a decade. They have been attracting players such as John Simpson rather than seeing them leave, although Ali Orr did go along the coast of Hampshire, which we will get onto. And they seem a team in harmony. I'm joined by Nick Friend, who spoke to John Simpson earlier and who we'll have an exclusive chat with in about 10 minutes' time, I imagine. Nick, was this start 3 wins out of 7, top of the tree, chasing promotion, in the context of last year and what's come before it, was it expected?
You'd say on balance, no.
Excellent.
There's something to move into. No, well, I guess it was to a point. And if you stripped away all the noise around Sussex last season, they finished 3rd in Division 2, albeit with a 12-point deduction that I think would have had them 5 points off the top 2. And that 12-point deduction came for those disciplinary issues that you mentioned before. That well, I guess sort of.
I think let's absolutely go into the disciplinary issues. For those who don't remember, Sussex had 4 disciplinary breaches that resulted in Pujara, who was captaining, banned. They were deducted 12 points, which basically, it didn't directly cost them promotion, but it basically put an end to their chances at the tail end of the season. There was crazy things happening, like players tripping up opponents, kind of
attempting to,
dangling a leg, kind of, what's the word? Attackingly. I don't know how you dangle a leg attackingly.
But for the point, the word
petulantly is a much better word.
But it is also a word, crucially. But
thank you very much. No, but it gives the context of a team kind of who are young, who are potentially not in the best shape.
Perhaps in a way, it spoke to a lot of the challenge the previous few years. It was a regenerated side that basically started again, didn't it? With a lot of young players. If we just to throw some names out there, of you mentioned Ali already. You've got James Coles, who's been with England Lions and has become a really, really good cricketer at 5 and bowling his left-arm spin. Jack Carson, who's been away with England Lions and has become a really good off-spinner in county cricket. Tom Clark, who's over the bat at the moment. Tom Haynes, a couple of years older, has sort of had to captain a lot of that phase. And when it was a very young side, Henry Cokum, I don't think he's played this season yet, but he's part of that seam attack. Then you've got Archie Lenham, likewise, hasn't played the season championship yet. Bertie Foreman, who they just won the O'Reilly Medal, I think it's called, so he's the third or fourth overseas player ever to win the O'Reilly Medal in Sydney first grade, which is mental for an English teenage off spinner. He's not made his first class debut yet, but he's another knocking around. Charlie Tier, who's away with Scotland, T20 World Cup as a teenage keeper batter. You've got guys like Joe Sarrow, who played a few games, Jamie Atkins, Sean Hunt, who is still knocking around in that squad as well, bowled really well in that Yorkshire game, I think it was, when Jayden Seales missed out. A couple of those names I mentioned there aren't there anymore, but most are. But I guess what happened is a couple of years beforehand when there weren't very many wins. I think Jack Carson, before the start of last season, had won 2 games of professional cricket in 21. First team, but he'd not played a white ball game, but he'd won 2 games of cricket in 21, essentially. And the risk, I think, for a lot of people at the time at Sussex and looking in from the outside was that you sort of risk breeding losers, don't you? If you have too much of a side that doesn't win, and that's all you've grown up doing, losing and drawing and suffering in 4-day cricket is they broke the record for the youngest ever championship side at one point. These things are all great, but I don't know. Perhaps in the couple of years leading up to this year, what we saw a bit was the consequence of being a very young side, some of the indiscipline, naivety, and experience that comes with all that. And I think what we're seeing now is the all the best bits of that exposure. If coming,
Sure.
sort of coming together. If you look at the side that drew at Middlesex last week, they are the top two in Division 2. Sussex have won more games than 6 of the teams in the division combined. And if you look down that side, you had Tom Clark and Tom Haynes opening. You had the 2 spinners, Coles and Carson. But by and large, you had essentially those 4 lads being complemented by mainly new arrivals and experienced new arrivals, whether that's Tom Alsop, who's been a couple of years now from Hampshire, Finn Hudson-Prentice, who's been away from Sussex, gone to Derbyshire, come back. Danny Lamb,
I think that's an excellent point. I think that's a really good point in terms of if you focus on Coles and Carson, there was a period of time where it was almost a joke about Sussex or a meme about Sussex that they were effectively playing like the local private schools, like year 12 team. And now those players are older and they have more experience and they're being complemented in a setup where they are still young players in terms of their age, but they're not necessarily young players in terms of their matches played, their experience on the pitch.
No, and those two in particular as well, actually. Those two in particular they've not just been on Lions tours, they actually travelled a fair bit with England's test squad last summer. Well, not travelled with. They were brought in a few times with the England test squad last summer to be around them, to netball at them. I think part of that was that Sussex didn't have a specialist spin coach, and these were seen as 2 of England's bright young spinners. I remember speaking to James Coles in pre-season, ironically, because Australia didn't have a left-arm spinner, he ended up slinging with a sidearm with the England boys to replicate Stark more than he. So he brought along essentially a premium dog thrower, but it speaks. But I do think it speaks a lot to the esteem they're held. In fact, in the press box on Friday, I think it was, one of the England scouts was there watching. I think Josh Fry's reaction to Coles' dismissal was there watching James Coles. He's been away with India, been away to India with the Lions, as was Carson. He's done a lot of work with Graham Swan the last couple of years, and on those trips he went to Sri Lanka the previous year as well. Sri Lanka or the UAE, maybe both. But yeah, point being, they've benefited massively from that early exposure. And I think going back to Ali Orr, actually, I think this is an important point within this, and perhaps goes back to your original question. Well, I guess my answer to your original question, that losing Orr was a big thing over the winter because he was arguably the most promising of that batch. He has a List A double hundreds. He played one of the maddest knocks I've seen in first class cricket in the last few years, following on against Glamorgan, whacked at 190 and 150 balls. They were 300 for none in about 2 hours. I think the night before, I think it was the penultimate night of the 2022 season. He didn't have a massive year last year. He didn't push on the same way. He had a few injuries, kept getting run out with on strikers' end. And I think the issue was that if you're going to tell people to be patient and to work with you while you develop these guys into a really good team, seeing perhaps the star of that batch leave that at that point to a local rival was gave all the irritations that you'd expect it to. And then if you chuck it on top of that, signing John Simpson a 3-year deal for Middlesex, somewhat out of the blue. He wasn't out of contract, and then making the captain. I remember speaking to John when he first signed and asking him what captaincy experience he had. And he probably had to rack his brains to summon Bronsbury in the Middlesex Premier League during the COVID year and some 2 stuff about a decade earlier. So, I say no. I say no in answer to your question originally because not sure anyone truly knew how this was going to play out, which was why initially Simpson was skippering on a trial basis for these first 7 games. It's gone better than anyone could have expected.
I think, in effect, the picture that's painted there is a season that could have gone one of 2 ways. And it still has time to. We're only halfway through the county championship season, having played 7 out of 14. But you're listing players like Coles and Carson who've had England squad experience, who've been brought in because they're thought of as cricketers in that higher echelon. The same with Ali Orr, such as the frustration that he's leaving, is because he was in that bracket of people who could go on to play international cricket. You only need to go back 12 months to remember when kind of Tom Haynes was always like listed on those, ones to watch, kind of fifth name down. They go, Tom Haynes is scoring quite a lot of runs.
But it's mad, but people think, I feel for Tom Haynes anyway, because I think a lot of people assume he's like this 28-year-old seasoned county pro because he's done so, he captained that 2022 season. I think he'd done a bit before then as well. He carried a can I think in that really difficult spell when they were never going to win many games because they were a pretty untried, learning on the job kind of team. He's only 25. He's younger than my brother, and like in my head, like my brother's a baby.
Of course.
And yeah, I don't know. He's only 25. He's got 10, 12, 13 years open the back to come, and he scores runs every year. You always feel like you look at a team sheet and you look at a scorecard rather, and he's in the runs.
I guess, and this might be an overly simplistic way of me describing it, but take away Pujara basically, and the kind of more seasoned, experienced heads at the club. People in senior leadership positions have seemed to have changed over the last 18 months. You've got Farbrace as coach instead of Ian Salisbury, Ollie Robinson. That's the bowler. Rob Andrews left as CEO, who was a kind of point of controversy in some ways or others. But those younger players are now kind of older and now taking on those mantles of the senior roles that they were kind of having to do too early. But fundamentally as well, what's been very, very helpful is that they have had excellent players available early in the season. They've had Jayden Seales and Pujara as their overseas players. Ollie Robinson's been around, and he might be around a lot more this season, depending on how his England ambitions go. And John Simpson joined as kind of wicketkeeper, batter, captain extraordinaire. As you mentioned there, he did join as a trial captain. He was going to give it a go for this block. As you'll hear very shortly, they've decided to extend that. And, well, Nick Friend spoke to John about Sussex's excellent start, his own introduction to captaincy, and had a detailed discussion about the current England wicketkeeper debate. And that chat is for you here right now.
Welcome to another episode of the Cricketers County Conversation. I'm joined here by Sussex's Red Ball trial captain. Is that still a thing? Is it going beyond the first 7 games? Now, initially it was we'll wait and see. But joined by John Simpson, who's got Sussex top of Division 2. I assume you're going to carry on post May.
Yeah, it's I'm going to actually catch up with Farby for coffee on Sunday before when we're in Glamorgan. So yeah, going to obviously at the start sort of agreed to do the first 7 games and then just sort of see how that all balanced out. To be honest, obviously captaining, keeping, batting, sort of obviously the batting and keeping aspect kind of looks after itself. I'd be pretty well averse to sort of know that those two will be in pretty good order, but obviously taking on the captaincy as well, I just wanted to just find out really how I'd be able to balance that and make sure it didn't affect both aspects really. But yeah, as I said, sort of going to catch up for a coffee with Farby on Sunday. But yeah, as far as I was concerned, it was doing that first 7 games and taking on and giving it the best shot and throwing myself into it, which I have done and really enjoyed it. And then as I said, to sort of kind of sit here, end of May and sit top of the table is obviously incredibly pleasing. So obviously there's a long way to go, as you know, and for me it's just now sit down with Farbs and I think from my perspective I want to take it on for the rest of the season and my aim is just to get Sussex promoted. That's where I think we all want to be as a team, and that's obviously where I want to be as well, and playing Division 1 cricket and the highest standard we can.
We obviously, I think we spoke in February and asked you about captaincy, and you, let's be fair, didn't have a clue how it was going to go. I think you were talking about, I think you said the last captaincy was Bronsbury in the Middlesex Premier League during the COVID year, and before that was a bit of 2 stuff about a decade earlier. Have you found it? I guess it's, you say 3 wins out of 7, most in Div 2, top of the table, clearish of thirds. Is it fair to say couldn't have gone much better than this, personally or collectively?
Yeah, it was. As you mentioned, when we sat down, I think in February we had that conversation. Was when you asked how much captaincy experience I've got, and I was like, well, I'm actually
probably racking your brains.
Yeah, exactly. And I was just sort of racking my brains, thinking, where am I? And then suddenly I was like, captain a couple of games for Bronsbury in COVID year, and then did a little bit of second team cricket for Middlesex. So as you can tell, I hadn't had a huge amount of experience, but obviously, when Farby sort of asked me to sort of take on the role, it was for me, obviously moving down to Sussex, I just wanted to kind of get my feet underneath the table and kind of get to know the lads and spend a bit of time with them before kind of agreeing to it. But yeah, obviously once I sort of agreed to take it on, it was just a case of throwing myself into it. And I sat down with all the boys, and had a coffee and a catch up for an hour, just to sort of get to know them better, and for them to hopefully get to know me better. And then when you go into the season, then any issues that do arise, we can get them resolved as quickly as we can. But from my perspective, it couldn't have gone any better. Obviously, we've played some really good cricket. I think we've put some bums on the seats, which is one of the things that I set out at the start of the season and set the guys a challenge to entertain not only the Sussex fans but opposition teams and fans as well. So that's the way that I wanted our guys to go. And for me, it was just a case of giving from a batting point of view, just letting each individual play their own game. And obviously it's a team first game, but I want individuals to go out there and play their own natural game. And like I say, the likes of Tom Haynes has started the season brilliantly. He's gone out there and along with Tom Clark, he's not started as well as he'd like, but you see he's got a huge amount of talent. And those two, when they get going, as you've seen, they can get us off to an absolute flyer. So and then having the experience of Tom Alsop and Pujara, and then in that sort of 3-4 position, who you as a sort of a kind of counter-attacking batsman or attacking batsman, it's great to have sort of those two guys around, because that they can sort of anchor that innings for you. And and then Colesey's come in, and at 20 years old is incredibly impressive. So it's been a great start. And as I said, I think for me, we probably could have had a couple more wins. That Northants game when we had them 9 down, 60 ahead. But obviously the rain and the light, and then obviously missing that full day at Leicester, being just shy of 300 ahead with 9 wickets to get. So yeah, when you sort of sit here now, it's it's all sort of rosy, but I know it's a marathon, not a sprint. This, and there's a hell of a long way to go. But our aim is naturally to sort of be in the mix come September. I think that's when all the really exciting stuff comes, isn't it? Especially 4-day cricket and even T20s and obviously the 50 over stuff as well. So yeah, that was kind of my aim when I sort of started out, is to sort of, as I said, do these first 7 games and see how I balanced it all out. And as I say, I've really enjoyed it. It's kind of been a breath of fresh air. And obviously moving down from Middlesex to Sussex, it was a huge. I'm just trying to think of the word there. It was a huge move for me. Obviously having 16 amazing years at Middlesex, but I really enjoyed it. I really thought that a challenge towards this latter end of my career was the right move. And as I said, it's sort of kind of sit here end of May, and everything's sort of really rosy, as I said. But from my perspective, it's nice going into T20 now and sort of down tool a little bit of the Red Bull captaincy, and kind of hand over to Mal, and go out there and try and whack a few white balls out of the ground.
How important is this? I guess from the outside, what you guys have done so well is, it sounds really obvious to say, but you've won your games while you've been pretty stacked. You've, I guess that you talk about this being a marathon, but you come back in what, for 2 games a month's time, and your 2 overseas have been so good in these last 2 months, both gone. You've obviously got 2 more coming in, and with Daniel Hughes and Nathan McAndrew, you might have Ollie Robinson, might not. I don't know. I guess it's very easy to have a strong side, have Pujara in there and have Jayden Seales in there from the start, but to make sure you win 3 of those 7 games, I guess is probably, say it sets you up really well. But I don't know, does that feel particularly important? Not that no slight on the 2 lads coming in, but having Pujara averaging 75 in first class in Championship cricket for Sussex, Seales leading wicket taker in Div 2. It feels like you've really maximised the guys you've had around.
Yeah, and that's the thing, isn't it? When you sign 2 high quality overseas, and obviously Pudge, who's just phenomenal. I actually said to him when he first arrived, when he's had a cup of coffee together, and I said, the first time I came across you was in an England under-19 Test match where I made my debut in Jamshedpur, and funnily enough, some things don't change. He churned out 100 in that game as well. So, but yeah, to have the likes of Pudge around was incredible. Not just for sort of obviously the younger batters and all the lads, because he's such a humble, genuine human being. He's one of the nicest blokes you'll ever come across. But I think the most reassuring thing is when you know he's out there with the bat. It's like the whole changing room just completely relaxes because he's just so at ease. He's just unflappable at times, and he's an absolute joy to bat with, because you just know you can play your own game, and whatever happens at the other end, he will maximise his skill set to try and get as many runs as he can for himself and the team. And then, as you say, having Seales has come in and been an absolute breath of fresh air. At 22, his skill and his energy, but also I think more importantly his character is for this team has been exceptional. I couldn't I couldn't sort of praise both of them highly enough. Like I said, Seales, 22 years old. And obviously he'll be involved in the Test series in the summer, and for the West Indies, which will be great. And he'll have a lot of of our lads will be cheering him on against England, but obviously naturally want England to win. But he's been absolutely brilliant. Like I said, his character around the boys, the banter he has in the changing room with the lads, but then also when you throw in the ball, he just wants to take wickets and knock a few heads off. So which is quite nice as a captain. He doesn't shy away from situations. So yeah, look, those two have been absolutely brilliant. And as you said, it's about trying to maximise your resources. And obviously in Daniel Hughes, we have somebody who's first class record, and for New South Wales and also captain of New South Wales is fantastic. So he's been around sort of the last sort of week, which has been brilliant. So he was there at Lords for a couple of the days, getting to know the lads, and obviously I look forward to working closely with him as well. And obviously Nathan McAndrew obviously played for Sussex last year as well. Max over for the last 3 weeks, and again he's been brilliant, getting stuck in with training and helping out, and ahead of the white ball stuff. And but yeah, having those two around for the next couple of games will be great. And then obviously Hughesy will finish the rest of the season, and then obviously have JD Unankat will be coming in for the last 5 games, which will be great. And the boys have spoken incredibly highly about him as well, about his his character. He's he's apparently was fantastic around the changing room, which is always exciting. And then but also his skill set as well. Left arm's going to offer something different towards the back end of the season. So it's a different skill set, and as I said, obviously having the experience of Hughesy as well should set us up nicely come to September. And but yeah, as you said, by having those guys around, I think Fabi's done an immense job in sourcing those guys out and getting those guys in. As quickly as he has done, especially as we know, it's very difficult to get overseas for the full year with all the franchise cricket that's going on. So he's done a fantastic job. As I said, it's those Pudge has been amazing. Seales has obviously been amazing too, and obviously like you say, Macca, Hughesy, and JD, are 3 guys that have fitted in really well so far. So yeah, it's. As you say, as a captain, it's quite nice to have those kind of guys around and characters, but also they're great to sort of bounce ideas out off as captain as well.
You a bit of a gambler that I know the game was dead at Lords on the 4th day, but lovely to see a 9-0 field. Was that just like collective boredom? See if we can, I don't know. I'm trying to remember if I involved in it, but what was whose idea was that?
Well, look, I think that last day, we tried to set a game up. Obviously, both teams were miles apart in their thinking, and then it's
what would have had to happen? Would they have had to avoid the follow on? You guys got they get another 100, and then
they didn't have to avoid the follow-on as long as we didn't enforce it. So they,
of course.
I mean, it would have been quite a funny moment if I'd have said, okay, we'll declare, okay, we'll enforce a follow-on. I'm not sure how that would have gone down in the spirit of cricket at the home of cricket. by a
burn some bridges pretty quickly with your old teammates.
Exactly. I'm not sure that would have gone down particularly well, but they didn't have to. Obviously, we didn't have to enforce a follow-on. So if we could have agreed a total, which we didn't, we were sort of miles apart.
Well, what were you pitching?
Well, it's sort of Well, I mean, we sort of said 5 and over, for sort of 70 to 75 overs, which they came back with 370, which for me just didn't work. It didn't work for Fabi. It didn't work for our lads. I felt on a short boundary, tired bowlers. Even though you do have two opening bowlers, 5 and over. I thought was pretty fair, but obviously, Jono and the Middlesex lads thought otherwise.
Was that a weird? How weird was that week for you?
Yeah, it was incredibly strange. Obviously, a lot of close friends in that changing room, and obviously playing against the team I played, all my career for. So it was just a really strange week. Probably the most mentally taxing week I've had of my career, I'd say. Obviously, once making a move down to Hove, and the first fixture I looked at was when we were playing Middlesex, and I was like, okay, end of May, and sort of so everything's kind of gearing up to then, and obviously, sort of started the season well with the bat, had a bit of a mini blip against Glamorgan and Yorkshire, which made me start to question whether captaincy was really for me. But those are the great things in cricket, isn't it? The ebbs and flow of the game, and trying to find a consistency and a balance of the two. But obviously come last Friday, just the whole week was pretty surreal, to be honest, because from walking in the pavilion and walking left, normally I'd be walking right, everything the reverse of what I normally do. Like I said, obviously on the Friday, losing the toss and being put in, as naturally thinking, okay, well, when am I going to bat? And for me, it was just trying to conserve as much mental energy for when I was going to bat. But obviously once that occasion sort of did arrive, I walked left down the stairs and ended up at the bowler's bar. So I ended up having to walk across the stairs and across, and through a brigade of people, which was quite amusing. I did have a little bit of a chuckle, but it was just an incredibly special moment. Obviously, as I say, the reception that I got from the MCC and Middlesex members was incredibly special and really touching, which was amazing. And I always knew, sort of when I was out there, if I could just get through 20 balls, everything had settled down, and my nerves and the whole sort of occasion just would just naturally just disappear, and I'd get into the contest. But it's obviously to get 100 at Lords is always special, but obviously doing it against Middlesex was I guess equally special, but incredibly strange as well. So but the whole 4 days were just for me just a really mentally taxing 4 days, even though I'd sort of done I felt like I was pretty much out there for sort of 90 probably 85% of the game.
You touched on keeping earlier, and before we recorded, you rightly pointed out this is a matter of discussion at the moment. You've been, roundly respected for 2 decades as an English keeper. But I mean, and as I sort of had to remind you have played for England in that funny old.
About that, I was like, oh yeah, I have actually.
in the COVID isolation series of what was it, 2021? How do you see it as I guess now as a senior, one of the circuit senior keepers, but I guess still someone that people listing the best glove men knocking around would be in that conversation with one or two others whose names always crop up. I mean, I don't know, is there anyone you've played against this year who's really impressed you? Anyone you've watched from afar who, I don't know, I guess purely from a keeping perspective that you enjoy watching?
Yeah, I think as we sort of spoke about, before we came on this, it's the hot topic at the minute. I think every journalist under the sun is writing about who's going to be keeping in this Test series against the West Indies. Obviously, it's such an interesting debate, because obviously if they were going to pick Ben Folkes, they'd have said, he's our man and we're going to back him. But obviously Rob Key and Brendan McCullum haven't come out and said that we're gonna back Folkes. And I just obviously sitting and reading, I guess from afar, it's sort of like who's the next cab off the rank, and it's kind of obviously whether it's James Drew, whether that's Jamie Smith, whether that's Ollie Robinson, whether that's potentially Phil Salt. Those are sort of four guys who sort of been sort of touted to take Ben's place, but or whether they actually go back to Johnny, but giving Johnny the gloves. As I said, there's no doubt Ben's the best keeper of the lot, but yeah, obviously something, whether it's his batting or his style of batting clearly doesn't fit into what obviously Brendan and Ben want in terms of style of play. But there's no doubt Ben's an outstanding batsman as well. You don't average close to 40 or above 40 in first class cricket if you can't hold a stick. And obviously his glove works. You don't even have to think about that. It's just more of what style of batter do they want. I guess from a keeping perspective, it's the role is kind of is being slightly diminished, because we want guys to go out there and score a shed load of runs at a decent lick as well. But the hardest thing is to sort of measure, the opportunities that get grasped, isn't it? And compared to the runs you get, it's always going to be the most difficult statistic you can compare. But obviously Ollie Robinson up at Durham, I forgot to mention as well. Obviously scored a lot of runs as well, and I think he got 160, didn't he, against Lancashire? Against Lancashire, obviously with having Stokesy in the team as well, will help and kind of think, is he that right man? But naturally, there you've got 4 or 5 guys who are incredibly aggressive with the bat, aren't they? All very different in terms of their keeping as well. But
what do you look for when you're watching? When you're watching other keepers? I don't know, like you're all. I feel like keepers are all sort of
we're all a different breed.
You're a different breed. I was going to say you're all badgers. Like you're all.
We are.
Every keeper I've spoken to talks about. I don't know how much they enjoy watching it done well. Like what? I don't know. It's probably quite hard on to phrase and probably to answer. Like what do you look for in what he's doing? Do you know what I mean? Like isn't it just watching guys' feet? Is it watching? I don't know how low guys stay. All that kind of stuff. What is it that you?
Well, he always sort of said, my old man always said, I know when you've had a good day. It's because I don't notice you. And that's always been the big sign of a good wicketkeeper. The more days you go unnoticed, generally the better you are.
Is that depressing though? Like in a way, like does it? Because I know everyone says it, but that whole philosophy takes for granted how difficult it is. When you kept at Lords for 16 years, where it famously wobbles around, and I don't know. I guess if you go unnoticed, you've probably had a really good day that probably deserves to be noticed. If that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it is depressing, but it's all part of the role. And I think, as you say, we're all badgers. We're all different in our own ways. But yeah, naturally, when the ball is wobbling around and guys have had good days, go unnoticed. The one thing that keepers do is they know how well the opposition keeper has kept, or how well you have kept yourself, even if it's without praise, because that's kind of the job, isn't it? But everybody recognizes everybody knows when one goes down. But you could have been absolutely brilliant for 95 overs, and then suddenly one goes down the leg side, there's a little edge, you dive into your left and you grasp one, and suddenly you've had a bad day. But true keepers know that's not the case. But for me, I mean, we have a plethora of really good wicket keepers in this country. And I think that's a great sign. I always just look at keepers, just in terms of how natural that they catch the ball with ease. It's kind of effortless. The feet work. For me, I'm not a huge diver, so I've always sort of said, for me, it's just the basic fundamentals of moving and anticipation. I like to try and stay on my feet as much as I can. I'm not, as I said, diving's probably not my most natural thing that I do. But I try and pride myself on having the best feet and trying to sort of get across the balls that other keepers might dive for. But that's the way it is. And then obviously, standing up, it's just about, aggression. I've been incredibly lucky with my old man being a keeper to sort of bounce ideas off, and but also for him to pick up little bits. And then obviously when I started at Middlesex and Angus Fraser took over as director of cricket, the first thing he did was said, "Who's your keeping coach?" I said, "I don't really have one." I just sort of kind of worked alongside Ben Scott and David Nash. And so then he said, "Right, I've got the man for you." I was like, "Oh, who's that?" And then suddenly he said, "Jack Russell," somebody obviously was my hero growing up. When I took the gloves, I took the gloves as a 10-year-old. I was a pretty dodgy leg spinner and left-hand batter until I took a pair of gloves. And then, my dad said, "If you want to watch a wicket keep, go and watch Jack Russell, go and watch Warren Hegg." Obviously, he was at Lancashire at the time of me coming through the age group setups. Like being Healy, who have had been really fortunate to have a few sessions with as well. So yeah, obviously when Gus said, I'm going to bring Jack in, for me, he's mentored me, most of my career now, and somebody who I speak to a lot about wicket keeping. He helps me out and he watches. I send him a little bit of footage here and there if I'm struggling with anything. But yeah, I guess at 35 now, I should know my keeping pretty much inside out. But as you say, going back to the keeping topic for England, it's going to be a really interesting one, because obviously I saw Rob Key said whoever they pick, it doesn't really matter whether they played any championship cricket or not, which I find strange in a way, because as a keeper it's about rhythm and feel, and if you've only just been playing white ball cricket and then suddenly you've got to go play a 5-day test match, it doesn't matter how good you are, it's going to be taxing, or you're going to be flagging at some point, because like anything, it's like having a few pre-season games and getting whether it be 120 or 150 overs into your legs just to try and get the stiffness and but also the rhythm and the timing of everything bang on, ready for the season. Look, I think it's pretty clear. I think they'll either go, for me, I think they'll either go Ollie Robinson or Jamie Smith. I think they're the two guys that they're looking for. I think James Reed's obviously had a fantastic last year and seems like he's coming to a little bit of form. He's obviously one for the future, but I think by just judging between the lines, I think they seem to obviously really like Jamie Smith, who obviously I played against quite a few times for Surrey. He's obviously a very aggressive batsman. You actually forget how tall he is. Towers over me. But yeah, he's incredibly gifted batter, and obviously he's working alongside Stewie and Folksy day in, day out, so naturally his glove work will be up to speed. But then obviously Ollie Robinson is started the season fantastic, and but obviously he's done incredibly well since he has made the move from Kent to Durham. But again, somebody who's very aggressive, but naturally there's always going to be a little bit of a bedding in period. If one of those two do take the gloves for England, I think expectations are going to be high because of the standard that Ben's set. I thought his keeping in India was outstanding. It's one of those, like you say, you don't even have to worry about his keeping. It's just the style of his batting. But obviously, if he wasn't to play and one of the other guys, take the gloves, it's like, as I said, for me, it's just there's going to be a bit of a bedding in period. Obviously, there's going to be a Test match of Lords, so that's always going to, as I said, as you rightly mentioned, that's always going to be one of the most challenging places with the wobble and after the bat. So sort of James Bracey, kind of thrown into the Lions Den a little bit, and he's a brilliant cricketer and he's a brilliant wicketkeeper himself, and he realised it's not quite as easy as it is just going from county cricket to Test cricket, as I said, it's one of those where we have to be a little bit patient with it from the keeping perspective, because even though guys will have whether it's Jamie Smith, who's kept a little bit for Surrey, or Ollie Robinson, who's kept quite a bit for Kent and Durham, there is still going to be a bedding in period to sort of give them a chance to sort of make it their own role, adapt, because naturally when you do go into that England environment, people expect you just to take the catches and stumpings, but don't forget how many of those guys you actually keep to. I guess with Ollie Robinson, he'll have Stokes and Potts potentially, who he knows inside out. But when you've never kept to Jimmy Anderson, or you've never kept to whether it be sort of likes of Craig Overton or Ollie Robinson, for example, people just expect you to, well, it's easy. But if you've never kept to them, it's very difficult.
You touched on before how difficult it is to quantify missed opportunities, and I guess it's one of the bits of the game where, for all the data and stats and averages and stuff, that numbers that people look at, it's the one. Don't know. It feels like the one unexplored area in how you judge opportunities taken, how you judge opportunities missed. I guess even what kind of buy you're talking about, whether it's a buy that's gone through your legs or one that's gone, been flung 3 feet down leg side. How, in the absence of that stuff, how do you sort of look after that in your own mind?
Look, I think it does. I think it's impossible, because what people, when you're trying to put a statistic together on missed opportunities, whether it be buys, etc., it's impossible, because we're all different builds and different sizes. So my leap might be is very different, or my diving distance is very different to what Ben Folkes would be, or from Ben Cox to Ollie Robinson to Michael Burgess, for example, or to James Reid. We're all different in terms of diving, and how wide we have our slips as well. So one man could dive and get a fingertip to it, where the other guy might not even dive. It might dive full stretch and get nowhere near it. So how do you, like you say, how do you quantify it? It's impossible. It's just one of those statistics that will never sort of stand up. I guess the easiest one is judging, the straightforward nicks and the easy stumpings, because you're never going to, you're going to quantify. Well, he took that. One guy took an amazing, one of the keepers took an amazing leg side stumping, but other keepers could do that. But how do you know? They might grass it. It's just a statistic becomes so. You with all the will in the world. I think I saw. I think was it Steve James did an article, and he got. Was it what's the Sky analyst called?
I would know if I'd read it.
Yeah, but anyway.
That's to say.
Yeah, but the Sky analyst.
I know the bit. I've seen the article. Yeah.
Yeah, but he obviously had 6 or 8 of the keepers in terms of statistics and percentage of catches and stumpings. But how do you quantify that? Is that just is that
nick off?
Yeah, exactly. Is that my career in over 16 years, or is that just last season's? I couldn't work it. I got sent it, and I thought, I'll just have a little bit of a read of it. I didn't even realize that I was in it. They just said, just have a read of it. I was sent by my dad, and he didn't even mention that I was in it. Instead, have a read of it. It was interesting. But how do you quantify? Putting a percentage on. If a guy nicks it, I'm 98% chance of catching it. Whereas if somebody else nicks it, somebody else is 93%. How do you, is that, as I said, you just don't know. And trying to get statistics, it's impossible. You've got to go off judgment from, whether it's myself or whether it's from Jack Russell, whether it's from Alex Stewart, on who they feel the right person is for the job. Because at the end of the day, we are all weird breeds, but the one thing that we're experts in is actually wicket keeping. And, we know this inside out. And as you say, trying to get a set of statistics together of who, statistically, this man's the best person, for the job, because statistics say this, and this. You're never going to go off that. You're going to go off on who you feel that the right person is. And I think one of the big things that Stokesy and Rob Keeves and McCullum will look at is character. What's his character around the changing room? Has he got the character to succeed at international level? And that's where somebody like a Phil Salt comes into it, doesn't he? Because he's obviously I made my international debut with him in the 50 over stuff, and you saw how destructive he can be. So You know, if that's what they want, somebody who's going to be incredibly destructive and in that sort of middle order, then you're not going to look past him. And obviously his glove work's improving. But again, you know, he's going to, you know, as I said, whoever takes over is going to take some bedding period to, you know, for let them to make them, you know, make that role their own. Because as I said, you know, we've been incredibly lucky over the years to have some fantastic wicketkeepers, and you know, obviously with if Ben doesn't play, which I'm hoping he does, you know, because I think he still deserves, you know, another opportunity, you know, to play for England and make that role his own. You know, as I said, yeah, it's a really intriguing topic at the minute, but yeah, he deserves another go. And you know, like I said, there's no question how good his keeping is. It's just whether he can get the weight of runs, and that's kind of the role as a wicketkeeper now, isn't it? And as you say, having, you know, at Middlesex, obviously having McCullum and having Adam Gilchrist come across, and you know, and overseas, you know, these two guys have sort of taken the keeping role in a completely different route and kind of changed the way the role is looked at. Well, exactly. It's kind of yeah. Was
that weighed on, like, you know, you played essentially through, well, obviously started post Gilchrist, but I guess you probably started at a time when the Gilchrist stuff was at its peak. You know, you better check what you did in like 09, didn't you? It was just a couple of years after Gilchrist had been whacking England around the whacker, but he'd obviously been doing it for years. Like, I don't know, like, is that I guess obviously the roles changed, but I guess the role as if this is, I guess this isn't a new thing. So I mean, just thinking back to the number of keepers that England have gone through who were brilliant keepers, whether it was Chris Reed or James Foster, particularly those two guys who I guess, like folks, average around 40 with the bat in first class cricket, but was sort of moved on for that reason. Like, has it always been a lingering thing for any English keeper over the last 10, 15 years? Has it just always been a lingering thing that you've got to, that it's seen that you've got to score your runs a certain rate at 6, 7 in a certain way?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, you know, if you look at, obviously, like you say, you know, Chris Reed and James Foster averaged, you know, 40 in first class cricket, both, you know, brilliant wicket keepers as well. And then obviously, you know, when they didn't feel that those two were the men, and then suddenly, you know, Tim Ambrose had a crack, and Tim was a brilliant wicket keeper in his own right, and batter. And then obviously on to Matt Pryor, another, you know, brilliant wicket keeper, you know, batsman for England, who, you know, I guess he kind of set the precedent in a way of the way that he wanted to go in terms of that really, really attacking batsman, key wicket. And, you know, by the end of his career, I thought he became a really, really good wicket keeper. And, you know, he's batted never in question, because he was always, you know, he scored at a quick rate. But as you say, with McCullum and Gilchrist, they have completely changed the complexity of the wicket keeping aspect. Because, you know, I guess when growing up, you know, my dad was, you know, when he gave me a pair of gloves, he said, you know, he now wishes he never gave me a pair of gloves, because he's like, well, no point, you know, being a keeper anymore. You might as well just be a batter and then catch a few. Yeah, but that's his own sort of.
It's interesting, because is that the way that, you know, like, cynically speaking, like, I guess you, the keeping purist you are, would still love to say to a 10-year-old, like, here are the gloves, work on this first. But you take a Phil Salt, and he is, I don't know, I guess a really good example of the opposite, isn't it? How, particularly with franchise cricket, and particularly how having keeping as that second suit gets you opportunities.
Well, that's it, isn't it?
Is that so? If you were giving, I don't know, if you're starting out with a 10-year-old now, would you have taken your dad's approach and say, look, become a really good aggressive batter first, and then we'll strap some gloves to you and get the balls, or would you want to, or do you still think
maybe in a lifetime I might have still been rolling those leg spinners out as well, been like Dhoni. But yeah, as you say, it's, you know, from that, you know, from Gilchrist and McCullum, you watch those guys just change games with a bat. And guys like, well, this is what we want now from the wicketkeeper. And in a way, you know, they were still very good keepers, but they were nowhere near the likes of a Jack Russell or Ian Healy, for example. Yeah. So now when you're starting out with a 10-year-old, it's always going to be about, let's get your, you know, be an aggressive batsman, because you know, franchise cricket, you know, there's obviously a hell of a lot of money to to be earned, and that's always going to be the biggest challenge with young cricketers now is, do you want the legacy aspect, which is going and playing 100 tests for England and being successful, and this is what I want, or is it the money aspect? It's your choice. There's no right or wrong, and we're not here to as I said, with a lot of the younger lads that are at Sussex, it's like, it's your career at the end of the day. It's what drives you. Is it the money aspect, or is it actually the legacy of going and playing 100 tests for England? Because growing up, that's what I wanted to do. I want to go and play test match cricket for England. I want to go and play as many times as I can for my country. But I guess in another lifetime, it might be actually, I want to go and play in franchise cricket around the world, and you can see, like you say, with the likes of someone like a Phil Salt, and I mean Tom Kohler-Cadmord's out there as well. Guys who've done fantastically well in franchise cricket, whether that be in the PSL, the BPL, or whatever, or the T10, and they've got their opportunity in the IPL. You can see that their games have gone to another level as well. Hence why someone like Phil's been talked about to play Test cricket for England because of his aggressive nature, and as I said, his keeping will continue to keep getting better. The more he does it, the more experience he has, and the more the more opportunities that he has to play franchise cricket and spend time with other keepers, and again playing first class cricket for Lancashire, and potentially making his Test debut for England. The more that these guys have these opportunities to play in these franchise leagues, they're going to be better. They're going to be better. There's no doubt about it, because you're practicing against better bowlers. You've got world class batters to bounce ideas off and find out how they go about things. But from a keeping purist perspective, growing up, I've always batted, but it was never, the emphasis was never really placed on how many runs you got. It was like the keeping role is, who's the best keeper, give him the gloves. That was kind of the outlook. And then all of a sudden, Gilchrist and McCullum spun that on his head and said, well, how many runs do you get and how quickly do you get? And it's like, okay. So you've got to change your style and adapt. And, as I said, I think this is, quite an exciting period for English cricket. As I said, we've got a lot of very attacking batsmen, wicketkeeper batsmen. It's exciting.
Very, very, very fine of you just go back to something you said earlier. And I guess a lot of the game has changed. But you mentioned Jack Russell and watching him as a 10-year-old. Like, is that, if you were saying to a 10-year-old kid, go and watch the keeper, is he still the one? Like, I mean, in terms of, I don't know, like has keeping changed? Or if you were saying to someone, go and watch this keeper, would it still be go and watch Jack Russell?
Well, I'd be.
I know you're personally invested in this.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, well, naturally, I'll say, I don't want to be big-headed. Come and watch me. No, absolutely. I think, so, and Ben would probably agree with me. Like, he's an outstanding wicketkeeper. I would never say to a young kid, go and copy his technique, because it's very different to a lot of other keepers. As I said, Jack for me was the one that my dad said to go and watch. I'd never had the sort of pleasure to watch sort of Bob Taylor and Alan Knott, who obviously were Jack's heroes growing up, and so I couldn't really sort of comment on them. But yeah, obviously Jack would be the one to go and watch. Someone like James Foster, Chris Reed did it slightly differently, because obviously having had a lot of good conversations with Reedy, obviously his big influence was Rod Marsh. So then, so obviously the slight inside hip, which I don't mind doing, line it up with your left leg to a right-handed batsman and vice versa to a left-hander. It means you can push the slips a little bit wider. There's different ways of doing things. But as you say, for me, if you're going to go and watch somebody, and the great thing when you watch Jack, and you sort of see bits and pieces floating around Twitter in that final when he was standing up to Mike. Yeah. In a nutshell, those three takes, when I watch it with the stumping and the one-handed take down the leg side, a lot of the stuff that we practice, would just be hugely around basics. And one thing that Jack's always sort of driven into me was just around having world-class basics, standing up and standing back. So that's, the big things that, we've worked on and you've had
your own viral clip, haven't you? There's that was the Champo game at the Oval last year, was it? A couple of years ago? You standing up to Bamber and Murtagh?
Yeah, absolutely.
Nice to get, because people do, like, particularly like keepers and non-keepers do lap up content of keepers standing up to the stumps. So there's something about it that
it's quite soothing, isn't it? It's quite like refreshing to watch in a way. Again, we want 90-mile-an-hour bowlers, but if you don't have them, and keepers up to the stumps to 75, 80-mile-an-hour bowlers, it makes it really interesting, as you say. And I think that's the great thing about the art of keeping is we're all different. We all have different ways of doing it, but I think the most enjoyable thing from a keeping perspective, I think all keepers will say, is getting up to the stumps to the seamers. Even though the seamers don't like it, it's an opportunity to change the game. I think that's the great thing about being up to the stumps. If as I said, when I worked with Jack, it was around world-class basics. That's all we worked about. But that mental aggression, his is far higher than mine. He used to speak about it. He used to just picture him and the ball in the background as like a dog chasing a ball, and I was like, well, that doesn't make any sense to me. But in terms of keeping wicket, it was just like where my thought process is, every ball is mine. So that's my trigger and my sort of mental aggression kind of approach, where it was very different. But so when you get up to the stumps of the seamers, it's a challenge. But I think the great challenge is, by getting up to the stumps, you can make things happen. But you've got to put the practice in to actually make these things happen and make it look as easy as you can do. But for me, that's the beauty about getting up to the stumps and trying to change the game, because especially on, like you say, on placid pitches where nothing's happening, it could just be, a leg side stumping, or you keep the bat in the crease and you get an LB, or a little outside edge that you take, and suddenly that can bring, 2-3 wickets. And, but yeah, I think that from a keeping perspective, Jack's the one. And, I still, like I said, I'm still in contact with him a lot. And, he sort of kind of set the standard of keeping for myself. He was one that's really driven sort of my wicket keeping and my career and the standards that I expect, just purely because he was always demanding more from me. Sort of the days of catching for 4 or 5 hours in the indoor school at Finchley, have paid off. And everyone thinks we're mad by doing it, but I felt he felt and I felt that I needed to do that every twice a week for 6 months, for 3, 4, 5 years, to get my keeping to a standard it is now. And now it's just sort of like it just flows and it's automatic. And but as you say, if you're a 10-year-old keeper and you want to watch anyone catch a cricket ball, Jack's your man. So, but he's been immense for my career, and somebody who I thoroughly enjoy catching up with.
Thank you very much to John Simpson for joining us here at the County Conversation. Nobody covers county cricket like the Cricketer, and you can get access to our coverage of all 18 teams online from as little as £3.99 a month. Our own top team of county championships have now won the outstanding online coverage of domestic cricket prize at the ECB Domestic Cricket Journalism Awards for 6 years running. So you don't have to take our word for it. We'll be back next week as ever. We will see you and speak to you then.